to coast.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Berbice 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
Hello, thank you for tuning in to Kaieteur Radio. I am Kevin Smith, and this is the Week in Review, where we recap all the top stories carried in the past week. Now, before we get to the Week in Review, let's get to today's Sunday, December 27th news. Certain tax exemptions have the effect of stifling local business development for the value chains of the extractive industries, said the African Center for Energy Policy, or ACEP, after conducting research into the usefulness of Ghana's mining sector. The finding is one of several which developing countries could find useful. ACEP is a think tank that conducts high-quality research analysis and advocacy in the energy and extractive sectors in Africa. In January 2020 a report titled The Relevance of Tax Exemptions in Ghana, the case of the mining industry, ACEP said that import duty exemptions on items that could be produced or sourced locally hurt the competitiveness and growth of local businesses. And now let's tell you, on December 20th, last Ghana marked its one-year anniversary as an oil-producing state. And on that occasion, many regional, local, and international stakeholders were keen to remind the new oil producer of the Herculean task it faces in ensuring that it transforms its 9 billion barrels of oil-equivalent resources for the benefit of all. One such person who sought to highlight the importance of this task was ExxonMobil Senior Upstream Advisor Maria Gudez. In her message to Guyana, Gudez stressed that the nation's prominence on the world market is rapidly changing. She recalled that prior to oil, Guyana held a low profile in comparison to its South American counterparts. In other news, details from the recently laid Auditor General's report for 2019 highlighted a slew of high maintenance costs for vehicles attached to the GDF, the Ministry of Social Protection, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Public Security, as well as Regions 3 and 6. According to the AG's report, these high maintenance costs were due to the ministry's departments and regions not assessing whether it was economical to retain or dispose of vehicles. It is in this regard that the sum of $251.619 million was expended on repairs and maintenance in respect of 118 vehicles during 2019, the report indicates. In other news, according to the audit report of 2019, one authorized vehicle uplifted 887,800 liters of fuel from the GDF, totaling a whopping 181.567 million. But that is just one of the many shortcomings discovered of the GDF with respect to the purchase of reconciliation and storage of fuel. The Auditor General, Deodat Sharma, stated in his report that $547.219 million was expended for the purchase of diesel and gasoline, of which $528.629 million was paid for fuel in bulk. And now let's tell you, the Guyana Police Force yesterday announced that they have joined with family in mourning the passing of retired Assistant Commissioner of Police and former crime chief Hiralal Makanlal. He was the head of the Office of the Professional Responsibility. He died Wednesday night. The police said that Makanlal was one of the 6 Guyanese who were awarded with national awards. He was the first to receive That should be the first in the force to receive an individual Medal of Service by then Chancellor of Orders of Guyana, former President David Granger, in 2017. A police constable was beaten and shot in his back yesterday at Middlewalk, Buxton, East Coast of Marara by a group of 8 men. The men are said to be from a gang known as Team Diamond Crew. According to a police report, the cop, 21-year-old James Gordon is attached to the Port Kaituma Police Station in Region 1 but lives in Buxton. He was shot around 3 hours while attending a party at Middle Walk. He is presently being treated at the Georgetown Public Hospital. Investigators believe that his shooting might have stemmed from a year-old feud Gordon had with one of his attackers. And now let's tell you the Guyanese Hindu community of New York is in deep mourning after a prominent Mandir member was killed tragically on Christmas Eve day. The New York Daily News reported that Ritawanti Prasad planned to forego her annual gathering with friends on Christmas Eve due to the coronavirus pandemic, but changed her mind at the last minute and ordered an Uber to a small get-together, hoping to spread some cheer. Meanwhile, the 54-year-old woman made it just 5 blocks from her Ozone Park home in the back of a black 2018 Toyota Camry before she was killed by a heartless hit-and-run driver who remains on the loose. According to the news report, Prasad's 50-year-old Uber driver was making a left from Rockaway Boulevard onto 103 Avenue when the car was hit by a man driving a Lamborghini Urus SUV about 7:05 p.m. Thursday, police said. And moving on, we have learned of a bizarre tale where a well-known robber killed himself by accident at Border Market on Christmas Day. Persons identified the dead man only as Trixie. He was described as a well-known thief. We were told that the man accidentally shot himself in the head around 3 hours. The man was having a few drinks and reportedly became intoxicated. He then took out a firearm and reportedly began playing with it, boasting that he was a bad man. Apparently, the safety of the weapon was not on. Witnesses said he was waving it around in the air, pointing it all over the place before finally pointing it at his head. There was a loud explosion and the man fell to the ground. And now we move on to the week in review for December 21st to December 25th, 2020. With Guyana poised to receive a fair bit of revenue from the sale of its oil resources, the Inter-American Development Bank cautioned the authorities of the day to exercise extreme caution regarding the portion it will spend. It is advising on saving for a rainy day and particularly the way in which it goes about taking on new loans. Meanwhile, many countries like Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela are prime examples of how oil can leave a country in economic shambles when they fail to manage its resources prudently. In other cases, countries have seen more than half of their population plunged into extreme poverty, while the family and friends of the administration of the day revel in the billions of dollars they've stolen from its people. Indeed, one would think that the political opposition, which served one term in office, would be fully acquainted with these challenges and would therefore be championing once a week at least for these matters to be addressed. Instead of having an opposition that is hammering the new government to get critical oil and gas matters handled, the APNUFC remains, quite frankly, asleep at the wheel. In other news, ExxonMobil Guyana yet again made unverified claims using block figures in its local content public relations campaign. Local content is the value that an extraction project brings to the local, regional, or national economy beyond the resource revenues, according to the Natural Resource Governance Institute. Meanwhile, as production at the Liza Destiny oil vessel reaches full capacity of 120,000 barrels of oil per day, ExxonMobil claimed that it has successfully commissioned the gas injection system, which was previously reported as being defective, thereby causing Exxon to flare billions of cubic feet of toxic natural gas. This development followed after Exxon failed to mitigate flaring at Liza 1 for 1 year. Details from the EPA show that in that same year, ExxonMobil flared 12.4 billion cubic feet of gas per day, equivalent to the removal of 1.6 million acres of forest. We also reported that the price of Brent crude is slowly inching back up after nearly a year of sinking down, since countries have begun to accept and administer the COVID-19 vaccine. Brent, the standard Guyana's Liza crude is being traded against, was uncomfortably over $60 a barrel early in 2020. However, due to the Russia-Saudi Arabia oil price war and more critically the COVID-19 pandemic, Brent crashed to $20 in the spring. Today, Brent is nearly $51 a barrel. Guyana's first million barrels had been sold at $55 a barrel. Meanwhile, the government of Guyana was considering putting up oil blocks for sale via bid rounds in 2021. This would allow Guyana to get much needed revenue as those awarded before were given out for free. However, concerns remained about Guyana's preparedness for such a move. And JHI Associates, one of the initial owners of the Kanji block offshore Guyana, benefited yet again from its ownership of the block through a sale of shares to UK investment firm Westmount Energy. Westmount announced yesterday that it bought 250,000 common shares in JHI Associates at an aggregate cost of $400,000. The purchase was completed last December 21st. We also reported that in response to a request in 2016 to help Guyana arrive at good legal, regulatory, contractual, and fiscal measures needed to keep corruption at bay, the UNDP had commissioned an analysis to be done on the state of the nation's governance systems. But after 4 years of being in possession of this document, nothing has been done. Meanwhile, according to the production sharing agreement Guyana signed with ExxonMobil in 2016, the minister responsible for the oil sector has only 2 years to audit the expenses the U.S. supermajor incurs at the end of each fiscal year. In other words, the minister only has up to 2017 to audit the company's expenses incurred in 2015. The official would also have to foot the bill for all costs associated with that audit. Also, cost recovery is considered an integral part of production sharing agreements that are signed between governments and oil companies. The mechanism is one that allows oil operators to recoup money spent on activities regarding exploration, development, and production of oil and gas resources. But the process, if not properly scrutinized by government, is often used by oil companies to rob nations of millions, billions of dollars by inflating costs. And the total revenue Guyana received so far from oil exports and royalty is almost $150 million. However, the country lost a lot more in 2019 due to the huge tax exemptions it granted to oil companies operating on its shores. Those tax exemptions total a whopping $600 million. This was revealed in the Auditor General's report for 2019. And now let's tell you, governments, especially of developing countries, should be more prudent in their determination of tax waivers for companies in their extractive sectors. There is a need for those governments to establish a basis for exemptions through analysis of what they will cost the government and how they are expected to benefit the country in return. That forms part of several pieces of advice for developing countries by African Center for Energy. And now we move on to the other politics segment of the week in review. With local government elections due in the coming year, the PSC called on those compromised GECOM officials to be removed before the process commences. Among those include GECOM CEO Keith Lowenfield, Deputy CEO Roxanne Myers, and District 4 RO Clement Mingo, who have pending matters before the courts for the role they played during the contentious March 2nd elections. And now let's tell you, government announced that it penned a new agreement with troubled Chinese contractor China Harbor Engineering Company due to the tune of $9 million for supplementary works to be completed at the Chedi Jagan International Airport. The catch is that the contractor will have to solely foot the bill. The new agreement signed gives the company until the end of next year. In other news, SOCU began combing through the finances of PNCR member James Bond as it continued investigations into the large-scale giveaway of prime state lands at Peters Hall, East Bank, Demerara. He is accused of being the mastermind behind a number of land deals which saw acres of state land being transferred to Chinese national Jian Fenyu. Not only that, Bond was said to have also pocketed more than $120 million from both deals. Meanwhile, the Financial Intelligence Unit said 29 new reporting agencies have registered on its database this year to support the fight against money laundering. The FIU director, Matthew Langevin, disclosed that this brings the total number of new agencies registered to 246. And we also reported the country's Attorney General Anand Lal wrote to the Commissioner of Police Nigel Hoppy instructing that the police force launch an investigation into the controversial Sussex Street bond. This comes on the heels of recommendations from a special report conducted by Auditor General Deodat Sharma on the bond. And also, Speaker of the National Assembly, Manzoor Nadir, set Monday, December 28, 2020 as the date for the convening of the duly constituted parliamentary committees. And also, details from the Auditor General's 2019 report show that some $199.381 million was overpaid by the APNU AFC for 4 major governmental projects. According to the report, these overpayments had occurred under 4 ministries. We also reported that President Ali announced that the government will be looking at areas on the Mahaica-Maikoni corridor to cultivate new developmental hubs. He explained that since Mahaica and its environs are heavily dependent on rice and other agriculture, the government is looking to create an agriculture hub, which should also see the development of aquaculture. And now let's tell you the PPPC could have opted to cash in on close to $15 million bond on the Chedi Jagan International Airport expansion project instead of penning a new deal with the Chinese contractor for a mere $9 million. This was according to former Public Infrastructure Minister David Patterson. Also, the Auditor General report for 2018 shows that some $306.205 million is outstanding in deliveries to the Ministry of Health for years 2015 to 2017. Notably, the head of budget agency did not respond to the AG's findings but recommended that the budget head and the Ministry of Health take action to ensure that the outstanding goods are supplied and, if that is futile, recover the relevant sums. And for the last entry, in the other politics segment of the Week in Review, controversial GCOM Deputy CEO Roxanne Myers will assume the duties of CEO as Keith Lowenfield proceeds on annual leave. And now we move on to the Crime Court and Human Interest segment. A family of 4 was forced to watch their Eccles East Bank Demerara home destroyed by fire. We were told it was suspected that the fire might have been of electrical origin since it reportedly started from a breaker. According to eyewitnesses, the fire began to spread quickly and the couple could not do much but grab their children and escape. Meanwhile, 6 drunk drivers were caught in a surprise road operation conducted along the West Coast and West Bank Demerara by a team of Region 3 police ranks. According to a statement from Division 3, the surprise operation spearheaded by a sergeant commenced at 19 hours and ended at midnight. We also reported that a discrete system for receipt of medicine has been implemented by the National Care and Treatment Center for HIV patients. This was stated by Center's director, Dr. Abiola Jacobs, who said that the system was created to ensure patients with HIV receive sufficient treatment during the COVID-19 pandemic, but confidentially, if they wish. Meanwhile, John Blanker, the Susudike East Bank Demerara man who was convicted in 2016 for hacking his 3 children to death while they slept, lost his bid to appeal the severity of his sentence. Blanchard was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment by Justice Joanne Barlow following an appearance at the High Court in 2016. Well-known former Anglican priest 82-year-old George Chakasang, meanwhile, was found murdered in his lodge home, and his partially decomposed body was discovered with multiple stab wounds around 15 hours. Crime scene experts noted that the former priest's forehead was also swollen. And now let's tell you an examination of the current environment and COVID-19 statistics since March paints a picture some would find promising, with the September to November period being the deadliest and most infectious month for Guyana. COVID-19 has slightly begun to abate. The number of new cases being detected is on a slight but noticeable decrease, and the death rate is also decreasing. However, 2 new highly contagious COVID-19 cases detected in the United Kingdom are threatening to spread across the world very quickly. And also 4 bandits who are armed with handguns and one with a knife carried out a daring robbery on a teenager, her family's maid, and the maid's daughter at Providence East Bank Demerara. The victims are the 17-year-old girl, the maid, 40-year-old Alomi Daniels, and her daughter. No one was injured during the incident. And also, the Lusignan inmate who had reportedly dodged bullets to escape was recaptured. The prisoner, Ishaka John, according to the Guyana Prison Service, was apprehended at Linetop, Monrepo, East Coast, Demerara. And that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Week in Review.